So I've always dreamt of having a twin. Lottie project, Parent Trap. It was just my dream. So imagine my excitement when one of my followers messaged me and was like, hey, is this your voice twin?
This is how I saved £6,000 in 3 months. Money saving tips that helped me save £10,000. How me and my boyfriend saved £10,000 for our summer vacation in 5 months.
Unfortunately, it goes a little bit deeper than that.
In reality, I am still super young, I think, but in terms of being an internet presence, I'm incredibly old. I've been doing this since I was 19 and I'm now 34, and that means that there is an incredible amount of things that I've seen change on the internet. I think at the beginning it was very much like there was no way to make money, so it was just like a hobby, and it would literally just be like you and me, like the audience and the creator, and we were directly talking to each other. As things have progressed and YouTube got sold to Google and AdSense became involved, so you saw ads on the videos, and moreover, like most people's income is coming from brands and like other things. There are like mediators between you and us in some ways. I like to think that we try to skip a lot of that, and there are like ways where we are directly connected, but there are a lot of middlemen in the middle between most creators and their audiences. I see the way that shifts the creator economy, and I see the way that exploits creators sometimes or exploits audiences in other times. But what I didn't see coming is that the middlemen would be able to cut us out completely. To lift the personal attributes of influencers that have been proven trustworthy over decades, and then to transplant them and use them to sell products that all of those people haven't had any sign off or knowledge about is wacky. I'll give you that. It's not, I didn't see that one, universe. So when I stumbled upon this account, Budget with Millie, that was seemingly using my voice, at first I didn't believe it. I was kind of like, no, maybe it's just somebody with a really similar voice to me. And I even messaged them being like, voice twins, which obviously they didn't reply to. But as I scrolled back through their videos, I realized that at the beginning of their channel, they'd used several different artificial voices over the videos. And there are several different kinds of pair of hands appearing in the videos, which points towards it being somebody's voice, somebody's AI generated voice, and particularly mine, just because I've never heard anybody else's voice exactly like it. And I think that's the same for most people. I'm not saying like I'm a special snowflake. I mean, people's vocal imprint is very, very specific. That's why there are only a very few amount of people who can do these incredible impressions, and why people like Ariana Grande, who can do amazing, famous impressions of people, are so lauded. And the fact that you can like know exactly who they're imitating from their voice. Like, it's a very specific like audio imprint that your voice have. Also the fact that like I've literally had hundreds of you sending me these videos being like, is this your voice? So the fact that everybody else is independently stumbling upon it and being like, that's Lena's voice, also kind of points towards it being mine. Also the fact that there are also some other accounts that some of my friends have come across on TikTok that are using exactly the same voice. So it's very, very unlikely that the Budget with Millie voice is theirs, and it seems increasingly more likely that it's mine. I actually contacted a friend of mine who works in AI, and they explained to me that another reason that it's likely to be my voice specifically is because I have put out an incredible amount, like a huge library of content of my voice without any music behind it, that's very, very easily scrapable. Like, I've given them a huge data set to pull from to build like the, I don't know what they call it, like the picture of the AI voice, or the like the code for an AI voice. So they said like particularly content creators and people who do audio content for free on the internet are particular targets of this kind of thing. And they even sent me, you've got to hear this, within seconds of me messaging them, this clip. Let me just hold this to the mic.
Here's how I saved £500 so I could donate it directly to the Tory party. Listen, I'm not saying it's definitely a voice clone, I'm just saying it's not that fucking hard to do in the year of our Lord 2024. I fucking hate Lucy and Yak. Like, who would spend £50 on dungarees when I can get a Primark t-shirt for a £5? It's actually bullshit.
So they, just from like a couple of minutes of work could generate me supporting the Tory party and fast fashion. It's kind of iconic in an absolutely terrifying way, but it demonstrated to me how easy it was to do and how likely it was that this person was stealing my voice. However, I'm not the only person. Prime examples of people in the public domain are Bloggolates, who not only has had a lot of their fashion designs lifted and regenerated, but also a lot of their videos of them in their fashion designs, and get this, somebody else's face superimposed onto theirs. So I can't even. Then there's Martin Lewis, who is the guy who runs Money Expert UK, what's it called? MoneySavingExpert.com, and he had like somebody rip off his whole image and endorse Elon Musk. It was really, really weird and loads of people believed it. Terrifying. And then I think, most comparatively, my experience is as similar, or most similar, to Scarlett Johansson, not only because of our looks. I think the similarities are undeniable. We're both sex symbols in our own right. But because she had a specifically voice-generated scam going on with a really reputable company, ChatGPT. They begged her, what seemingly for years, for her to be the voice of ChatGPT. And when she eventually said no and the deal fell through, a few days later, they came out with ChatGPT's voice, which sounded almost exactly the same as hers. Of course, she fought it. I think she's suing them. She sued them, something like that. People who are massively rich can do that, but I, on the other hand, cannot. If it is my voice, and I'm going on the working assumption that it is, and they're selling something made out of plastic that I honestly don't agree with, and like the whole idea of like individual saving being your responsibility rather than like collect. Anyway, we simply don't have time. Basically, if somebody was to steal my voice to advertise these money wallets that they're selling on their website for people to like do personal savings and keep a huge amount of cash in their houses, like it's not really what I would have picked. I mean, all stealing is stealing, but if somebody had robbed my voice to promote Project Drawdown and like all of the different climate solutions we have, it's inarguably, just because I'm human, I would be less pissed. But what can I do about it since I'm not a millionaire? I could contact the ASA and trading standards, I guess. Does my voice, since I gave it out for free on the internet, qualify as biometric data and therefore is like, you like other people aren't allowed to store it or use it in the same way? Like, am I protected by those laws? I honestly did reach out to some charities who deal in this kind of thing, and I didn't hear anything back, so I'm not qualified. I have no idea on the law side of things. But as this channel is more of a like concept philosophical chewing the hay kind of channel, I thought I'd take a little bit of a different route and chat about this concept of like having your identity stolen and what that might mean for the future. The first people I turn to, of course, obviously, are the Gumption Club, my patrons. And when I asked them like what I should read around this, how I should feel about it, any guidance they had, the name of one book kept coming up. That book was Doppelganger by Naomi Klein. This book is about kind of like the self-doubling we do when we think about our ideal selves, the shadow self that's behind that, and like anything to do with parenting to autism and aging, but also on like a wider level, the weird mirroring that happens between the extreme left and the extreme right and what she makes of that in the current climate. And there's so much about this like eerie other, the idea of the doppelganger, and it really helped me process my weird feelings about having my voice stolen and how I can understand it on like an existential level. Like, I don't know what I can do about it legally, but I know that I can organise my own thoughts about it and work out what like productive things I can take away. So I thought, if you've got the time, I could pull out a few of the passages that meant the most to me when it comes to thinking about this topic and chat about them, basically. The first one relates to this idea of like being kind of obsessed with your own avatar, and this idea that like having your avatar doubled is like the ultimate wrong, which I don't think it is. I think there's also like worse things that can happen to you. So this was quite grounding. She talks about this idea of the shadowlands, like the reality of the world that we don't think about and we can't bear to think about, that we avoid even when it's on social media. We avoid it because we do not want to be bodies like that.
We do not want our bodies to participate in mass extinction. We do not want our bodies to be wrapped in garments made by other bodies that are degraded, abused, and worked to exhaustion. We do not want to ingest foods marred by memories of human and non-human suffering. We do not want the lands we live on to be stolen and haunted. We do not want the children we love to live in a world that is less alive, less wondrous, and more frightening. How could we? It's so unbearable. No wonder we work so hard to look away. No wonder we erect these walls, literal and psychological. No wonder we would rather gaze at our own reflections or get lost in our avatars than confront our shadows. So she does talk about influencers and this idea of like being obsessed with your personal branding, and how much my voice is part of my personal branding I don't know, because like I didn't choose it, but it is like accidentally part of me. And people do that. I've changed my accents over the years. I've admittedly probably lost my Coventry accent and become more proper, and I almost notice that I talk a little bit posher when I'm on YouTube, to be honest, than when I'm not. And I think that's like a presentation thing, some kind of internalized accent classism, something's going on there. But this idea that your voice is you, and therefore if your voice is stolen then you can be stolen, it kind of feels a little bit Ariel, a little bit Little Mermaid, when she steals the voice but the prince still falls in love with her even though she doesn't have a voice, even though you think that the voice is the most important thing about you. It's kind of not. That made me feel like kind of like, okay, how upsetting is this on a scale of like 1 to robbery? Like how much of my voice is myself? Like if I had an accident or something happened to my voice where I couldn't speak anymore, would I still be myself? Yeah, probably. There is so much hanging on like personal autonomy and privacy and stuff like that that feels so important but also completely out of my control, and this incident reminded me of that it's hard to think about that compared to other stuff that might be impacting my life that's probably more important and more universally concerning, like climate change, or like the fact that our water is becoming contaminated in the UK, and like all of these kind of things like are probably as important as like identity theft. But for some reason, like I'm like, oh my god, it's like really like jarring because it's happening to me, and because I am encouraged by the internet to become obsessed with my own avatar, and like anybody threatening that feels like way more important than anything else, and it's probably not. Another passage that stuck with me: Freud observed that when a person is confronted by their doppelganger, they become unfamiliar to themselves. On an individual level, that is deeply destabilising, as I have learned. But I also know, as an activist who has lost herself in causes and crowds, that becoming unfamiliar to oneself need not be a horrifying experience. I have felt it to be transient. So this idea that like you know, this horrifying thing where you're faced with a mirroring of yourself, as she is in the book, she talks about being constantly confused with Naomi Wolf, who is I would say ex-feminist that has gone really far to the right in a terrifying way, and like being confronted with your shadow self, or like this other imitation of you, and why it's so horrifying. But then like, is it as horrifying as the other stuff, and is there something liberating in having parts of you that you think are part of you taken away, and to realise that you're still yourself, that you still have your personhood, and like you know who you are, even if other people don't. I think that you're selling plastic wallets on the internet. You know, your sense of self doesn't have to be rocked. It can be destabilising, but it can also be transcendent. Loved this bit. She's talking about the message that she's taken away from her like journey with her doppelganger, that it's time to loosen the grip on various forms of proprietary pain and selfhood, and reach towards many different forms of possible connection and kin, towards anyone who shares a desire to confront the forces of annihilation and extermination and their mindset of purity and perfectionism. Faced with the ultimate doppelganger threat, the flip into fascism that is already well underway in parts of the world, this ability to melt some of our hard, icy edges of identity, however well earned those defences may be, will be important to any hope we have of success. So this idea of like your identity having soft edges, and it not being something that keeps other people out or other people's experiences out, and being like, well, you don't understand because you haven't had this, you're not like me, or like this is me and that's you and you're over there and I'm here. She's saying that like the way the left sometimes operates is like that, and this obsession with selfhood can stop us from seeing what's collectively wrong. So I guess when I'm thinking about like what I take away from that is like, do I want to pursue like my own lawsuit about this thing, or like probably not, and probably wouldn't be able to or afford it to anyway, and I don't even know if the laws exist to protect me. They probably don't. But do I get stuck in that and being like, oh, that's, you know, oh, somebody's taken my voice? Or do I think like, time to soften my edges of like what my identity is, time to think more collectively about what the threats that AI could pose to us as a group, and maybe think about how I can stop that from happening or campaign for that, rather than being like, this one person stole my voice. So I guess that's one takeaway, but it's really, really interesting. Another thing that made me think a lot about this is actually at the beginning of the book. This part has stuck with me, and if you've noticed some of the clothes, if you're a close follower of the channel, you'll notice that I've actually started seam ripping some of the labels off my clothes, because I don't know, I find it weird that I'm wearing branding a lot and I don't know how I feel about it. But anyway, I obviously need to read her book No Logo, because I think she talks way more about it in there. But this section, just, I was like, she talks about how she has this book called No Logo, which is about anti-branding, and the effect of releasing that, and how it became her brand. Like, the irony of releasing that book was that she was the No Logo woman. Like, she was the one who talked about, and that in itself became a personal brand. No Logo turned me into a brand. It was too late to change that, but I figured that I still had one option left, and that was to become a poorly managed brand, one that broke the rules against dilution and overextension. In practice, that meant letting the knockoffs reign free and swearing off the thing that had made me briefly famous, writing and talking about branding and marketing. So this idea, this kind of like catch me if you can thing, where it's like, yeah, you can steal my voice, but you can't steal who I am. And like, now you've done that, I'm gonna go and do something else. Like, you can't take away me. You can take away some of my personal branding, which isn't me. Letting the knockoffs reign free, as it were, to be like, well, that's not the most important thing about me. So you can take that aspect of me, but at the end of the day, like, it is just like a biological random assignment of the way my throat and my larynx is position. That's why I talk that way, and the way that the people around me spoke as I grew up, like, that's why that's there. It's part of my happenstance, but it's nothing that I've chosen. And it's, you know, if my voice changed, oh, I don't know. Maybe it is important. This is why, like, reading it through, it's kind of like, it confuses me as much as it clarifies things, in that I'm like, they are my experiences, and I know that, you know, some people have harrowing experiences that become part of who they are, and for better or for worse, and that's kind of indelible. You can't take that away. It remains like a permanent thing. But when it comes to just like the way you speak and how arbitrary that decision was, you know, in the grand scale of the universe, I could have been born anywhere in the world to any parents, and this is how I was born, and this is my accent, and this is the way my throat has been constructed in the womb because of the DNA that I have. It feels random, and therefore part of me. But then I guess it's also the way I speak is part of my experiences. It's part of who I've overheard and what I have interpreted out of that, and how I've chosen to speak, because like, me and my brother speak very differently, and it's because we've just decided to take on different aspects of the people around us. Because then it's like, but it's part of my history, it's part of like my experiences is how I speak. But then if I lost my memory, that wouldn't make me any less me. Like, are my memories me? Let's move on to the last quote before I have a complete existential meltdown. Let me know what you think in the comments. I'm sure experiences vary, and then it becomes less or more important to you. So you tell me. She talks about John Berger saying this thing, that calm is a form of resistance. And she says, I think about those words often. Calm is not a replacement for righteous rage or fury at injustice, both of which are powerful drivers for necessary change. But calm is the precondition for focus, for the capacity to prioritise. If shock induced a loss of identity, then calm is the condition under which we return to ourselves. How is a human writing like this is so good. And when she talks about this idea of talking about shocking concepts, she says, the goal should never be to put readers into a state of shock. It should be to pull them out of it. Calm is the condition under which we return to ourselves. Calm is the calm. I can't handle it, it's too good. So therefore, with those thoughts in mind about calm and resistance and loss of identity and like loosening your grip on identity as a form of resistance, I've tried to come up with some calming takeaways from this whole debacle. 1, my voice is obviously, to some people,
trustworthy. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been stolen by this company. If I have a voice that makes people feel safe, then I can use that voice to say things that I actually mean and that I feel are important. And it's a good reminder that that's like something really lucky that I have by happenstance, by biological happenstance probably, and I'll be able to deliver those ideas with much more complexity and warmth than an AI person or thing, robot could ever do. So that's cool. The second thing, the fact that these people behind this account have spent all of this time and money, apart from the money they would have used to pay me, no bitterness here, use these resources to make all these planners and spend all this time making all of this fake content. And there's a warehouse somewhere with all these planners sitting there and being shipped out to people, tells me that they know, and they're right, that there are lots of people out there that are incredibly anxious about the resources that they have at their fingertips. Huge swathes of people worried about their relationship with money and ready to have solutions placed in front of them. That's also interesting. So how can I take both of those things and respond like a human out of the horrific AI and capitalist soup that has been presented to me? Well, as I do with all problems, I turned to Vinted, and guess what I found? A second-hand version of one of these frickin' planners. And I've got an idea.
Hi, my name is Lena, but you might think it's Millie because it looks like someone has been using AI to steal my voice to sell you these plastic money saving planners. There are aspects of myself that I feel have been hard to get to know, but my voice has always felt like a part of me until I heard it coming from someone else. What's weirdest about these videos is that fake me and real me both agree that money is precious and that it has power. And like the people who are buying these wallets, I'm also worried about what the future might hold. But we have very different ideas of what we should save to save ourselves. So here's what I'm hoping to tuck away to use in the new world that is coming. A sense of home that goes beyond my own four walls to the people who live around me, and a fury that makes me want to protect them and the ground that we live on. A new way of eating, because money will kind of be meaningless if the crops fail and we keep using our land to farm animals rather than directly feeding ourselves. And a sense of fun, because when we hold on to each other instead of our old habits or our instincts to hoard, we're way more likely to survive and have a proper laugh along the way. This book taught me that there are worse things than having your brand stolen, that defending your sense of uniqueness isn't as important as defending your humanity. So, Millie, whoever you are, you might keep stealing my voice, but you can't have my silliness or my soul. Thanks so much for watching. I would love to hear your thoughts on AI and the ways you've seen it play out in a scary way or maybe even in a positive way in the comments below. This video was made possible by the Gumption Club. They tip me for every video that I make so we don't have to be interrupted by a sponsor. Oh, the luxury. We have a secret Discord, a secret Facebook group. I do weekly podcasts on there. It's a whole thing. It's a whole thing. So if you want to join up, I will leave the links below to find out about that. From me and all of my evil twins out there, frog snog out.